When you know what you want for the future, you need the present to line up with your goals. UCF Online offers more than 100 fully online programs in healthcare, engineering, criminal justice, and more, so you can get to your future and beyond.
From the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning, I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And I am Tom Cavanaugh.
And you are listening to Topcast, the teaching online podcast. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Kelvin. How are things?
Some things are awesome. Some things are almost awesome.
Okay. Well, on the various, stages of the awesome scale, if you're on the right side of that, all's good. Mm-hmm. All the things, as they say.
All the things. Some of the hey, if you get some of the things being awesome, you could be doing worse.
That's right. So, speaking of awesome, what's in my cup?
Well, Tom, thank you for asking. Today's coffee is a small batch, single origin Ethiopia Yirgacheffe from Perla Specialty Roasters in Coral Gables, Florida, a place I think known to you.
I know it well.
Yes. One of the things that struck me when I opened the shipping envelope containing the bag of freshly roasted whole bean coffee was this very prominent QR code. They had it taped right across the, where you want to open up the thing. You can't not see this QR code. You got to remove it in order to open the thing. I'm like, well, that's interesting. And so I scanned it. And then, I was like, oh, what's this? A little card fell out of the envelope when I opened the bag, and it was a redundant QR code link. I said, is it the same thing? Yes, it's the same one. And it was this whole brewing guide for this particular batch of this particular coffee. Stuff like, well, for this brewing method, you want to have this ratio of water to coffee. You want to have this many minutes of brewing, exactly so. You don't do espresso, you don't do French press, you want to do pour over. And two different little videos and a little text summary just for this. And I thought, boy, they are taking this seriously. And you don't normally get that. What you normally get is, we recommend, here at our roastery, we recommend these kind of ratios. You don't get... We roasted this last Thursday, and here's the deal. Here's what we want you to do. And you're like, they want me to have an exceptional cup of coffee, which, I'm in favor of. But I thought, well, the jaded among us, we'll call them Tom, this is probably just like a marketing ploy. This is hype. It kind of, it can kind of feel that way, right? And I don't know. I held out hope for a really great cup of coffee, and it made me just a little bit neurotic as I was trying to get the time, the brewing time exactly right, and all that stuff. Anyway, what do you think of this coffee, Tom? And could you find a connection in there somewhere to today's episode topic?
I do like the coffee. It's very good, and I do like Coral Gables. I spent a lot of time there. Mm-hmm. And I will say that people who take their coffee seriously, I respect. Mm-hmm. I just don't have it in me. Mostly I need to know how many scoops of the instant to get it to dissolve properly in the hot water. So as far as the connection goes, I don't know. I'm struggling a little bit with the connection. If it sounded very instructional.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good.
And kind of educational about how to brew a good cup of coffee, and we're going to talk about instructional methods.
As one does.
As one does, including video. But I'm assuming that's probably not what you had in mind.
Yeah, that's as good a connection as any. I was thinking particularly of the potential bifurcation between hype and helpfulness and hope to be found in these instructions, this brewing guide. Is it hype, or is it going to bring me some hope that it's going to be really helpful?
Okay.
So I thought, that hope versus hype thing.
I get that. Yeah, there's a bit of that in our episode today.
That's right.
Okay.
So maybe I'll say that you, Tom, recently interviewed Jeff Young, And undoubtedly, many of our Topcast listeners are familiar with that name. Jeff Young is currently the managing editor of EdSurge and the producer and host of the popular EdSurge On Air podcast. And previously, for many years, he was a reporter and editor at the Chronicle of Higher Education. So you want to tell us a little bit about what this interview was about?
Yeah, I've known Jeff for years. Good guy. He's got his finger kind of on the pulse of what's going on in our industry. And we talked specifically about an article that was published in EdSurge in May that was sort of lessons learned from the pandemic. And we just used that as a jumping off point for a wide-ranging conversation.
All righty. Well, through the technological marvel that is modern podcast time travel, here is your interview with Jeff Young.
So, Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to be on Topcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, what I thought we might talk about is one of the articles that you co-wrote recently. It came out in May in EdSurge, and it talked about sort of lessons learned through the pandemic. And the pandemic has been a theme of Topcast over the past 2.5 years or so, as it has been, I know, for a lot of media and podcasts and just life, right? But as I went through that article, something kind of occurred to me, kind of as a way to frame the discussion. It seemed like the lessons learned that were discussed kind of fell into two different categories. In one sense, there were some very practical kinds of suggestions, things like flipped courses as a growth out of the pandemic, virtual reality, student supports in courses, and then there was another category of lessons learned that seemed much broader with kind of more abstract kind of implications. Things like we should be more student-centered, we should have more empathy. And how will universities work in the future, which is probably a much larger topic. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that observation with you and see if that was sort of by design, or is that just how the feedback came back to you when you interviewed all these leaders?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I feel like it was probably more coming out of the leaders we talked to, because we try, especially with this exercise, it's been such a time, right? We've all been through some big stuff. And we were really interested, I've been covering, as you know, this space for a long time for EdSurge, and even before that at the Chronicle of Higher Education, where I was before. So I've been reporting on higher ed, and a lot of it on that time on innovation and technology for a couple decades, actually. And we basically we went into this story saying, well, we used to see a lot of people like you as well at conferences, a lot of innovation leaders at colleges, at the conferences we go to, all the things that got shut down during the pandemic. And so, meanwhile, we kind of had a list of people we were interested in reaching out to at a mix of institution types, right? We've got somebody from Stanford. That's a very high-end, high-resourced institution. And, we also have somebody at a Elgin Community College, right? A community college we know, and we really work hard at EdSurge to, we know how big and different higher ed is as its different facets. And so we wanted to get a cross-section of types of universities and just talk to some people we know are just really up on things, and to hear both what they see at their own institutions as the most lasting lessons and what they're observing from their colleagues who I know they're in touch with still. And so it really was really trying to listen. And I'd say that there's a lot of things that we heard that didn't even make it into the story, because we really, we kind of divided up, and each, there's 3 reporters that we just kind of each talked to 3 or 4 people. And, all of us had a couple little things we wanted to ask, but frankly, it was like a listening session. What is on your mind? And I would say it was a pretty interesting breakdown. I think you've identified it really well. Like, some of it was super practical, seeing professors on their campuses really dive into ideas that might have been there already, like a flipped classroom, and really get to do it because suddenly in the emergency remote learning, and then wanting to try to continue it in some form even beyond. And then some of it was a soul searching, big picture questions of like, are we doing this right? How do we kind of make continuous improvement? How do we think about innovation and working with professors now that we've all gone through this? So I think it was a mix of both.
Yeah, well, and I noticed that diversity of the institutions that were represented and appreciated that too. But one thing that I felt, as somebody who's in sort of a leadership position in one of these roles, I related to everything that was being said, no matter who it was that was kind of the person that was being kind of quoted, but it all resonated with me, and it's certainly been consistent with our experience. For example, one of the folks that was talking about Flipped and how Flipped is going to grow as a result of faculty being exposed to all of these emergency remote tools like Zoom and everything else. But one of the quotes is, what do we actually want to use class time for? And it's both a practical but also a very broad philosophical kind of question.
Yeah,
it's
like
one
a
that
deep thought, right? That's
exactly.
A big one.
Yeah, we're grappling with that here too. And I just wondering if there were any other kinds of insights that kind of popped out like that, as for at least for the folks that you interviewed when you were preparing the article.
Well, I will say one thing that was on my mind was I've been doing this long enough, and I know you covered this back in the day too, of the Mooc craze, right? The massive open online courses. And one of the things that I heard at that time was, okay, this could be great for universities because maybe more energy will be devoted to teaching in a academic environment at a lot of colleges, not all, but a lot, where the professional kind of like what get rewarded for is often research, or maybe within teaching there isn't as fine-grained an incentive structure to really innovate or to experiment, or to even apply the kind of research that's being done on teaching all the time to back into classrooms at institutions where that research is happening, ironically. And so I feel like one of the things that at that time, 10 years ago, there was a lot of hope that maybe teaching could get its due, or maybe more professional time and energy of these smart people that are at these positions, in professors in classrooms across the land, they'll get to spend more time on it because they've now seen there's new incentives with these big open classes and big infrastructures that were being built up at colleges like yours to support this kind of experimentation. Now, I feel like, some of that hype and hope, that's a whole other story that we reported and didn't all turn out the way the early proponents hoped. But I feel like there's a little bit of a similar moment right now, but in that one, it was like people chasing a dream, maybe. In this one, it's the impetus for it is literally the opposite. It's coming out of a crisis. It's coming out of something terrible that happened to all of us. A scary health crisis of the pandemic. And, certainly nobody wants that. And a lot of people didn't love the Silicon Valley money pouring into higher ed either, but that's another story. But, this health crisis, I think, has brought an attention to teaching and to the student life that professors, are in the room with, the life of the students, that it just brought that into focus for more professors probably than in previous times of excitement over technology and teaching. And so I do think, the question again though is what will stick after the crisis ends? Like after the big moment where everybody's talking about it and where it's on everybody's mind, which, we hope the pandemic now fades and we can go back to a bit of normalcy with our lives as far as that. So the question then gets back to, I think, one we faced before. Like, have professors now confronted some of these big questions? Like, what do I do with class time? Is it best serving students the way I do it, or could something else come? Those questions are back on the table, and for more professors than just the kind of an innovative set that is going to be drawn to that no matter what's going on.
Yeah, I think you're
So
absolutely
now
right.
what? Now, does that stick or not?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there are certain things that I hope stick, like an emphasis on empathy, right, or being student-centered, or some of the other things that are listed in that article that, we probably should have been doing more of pre-pandemic. But
Sure.
pandemic made just, put a spotlight on the need for some of that, because everything kind of got cast into high relief. Students who were in crisis needed extra support and all of that. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's funny though, if you'll indulge me a little tangent. I was reflecting too before we kind of hit record on a conference dinner you and I had back in March, and we were talking about the metaverse. And
Yep.
I thought about that as I was rereading this article, because there is a good long section on virtual reality, which should be, set as distinct from the metaverse, but there's some overlap there.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel, we'll see if I'm right or wrong, that there's a little bit of that Mooc hype going on with the metaverse right now that you were kind of just referring to, that from 10 years ago, everybody thought Mooc was going to change everything. And it didn't really. Some stuff on the edges, there's some new companies and some new business models, but we're still doing what we were doing 10 years ago. And I wonder if you've thought any more about the metaverse in the context of that kind of just, publicity and hype and Silicon Valley money coming into the higher ed.
Well, one thing I will say is that there is a primetime TV ad by Meta, formerly known as Facebook, where it literally has a 30-second spot on a vision of a college classroom, a couple different college classroom ideas in the metaverse, which is a signal that there is a lot of big money being directed at this. And so that does make it similar to Moocs in that impetus and kind of funding rush. And yeah, I think, but the other question is the question about whether that is really the thing that will stick. I think the limitations on VR. And one of the things that I came into it a little bit, as I think I told you at that dinner, like wondering, is there much there in some VR experiments? And at a time where there's so many challenges, let's say, to higher education, is that the first battle you pick? It can feel like a bell and whistle in a time of extreme kind of structural questions about structural equality and structural innovations that need to happen to just kind of be effective. And so I guess there's that question. But I was struck in our reporting of this story how the focus on VR was like, okay, if you could actually afford to build your own VR materials, then maybe it would work in cases where back to that question of what you use class time for. If hands-on and something in our virtual hands-on in that case is better than a lecture, then maybe, and you can make an affordable, kind of content creation system, which is the big question around VR that's still out there, because nobody knows yet what it'll quite, what the platform will mature into. But I think that's one of the big questions. And so I thought it was interesting that the people we talked to honed in on that. Like, it wasn't just an excitement for its own sake. It was like, wait, we are hearing that people want to be hands-on and they want to feel like they're experiencing something. And so if VR can be done at scale or at some way that's affordable and accessible, then it's worth a try. It was what I was hearing. And so I'm open to that more than just like, let's build some cool VR things because the headsets are neat to look at.
Yeah, and that resonated with me too. And there was an article or a line in the article that you just kind of alluded to, which is that, if institutions can build their own stuff, because there's just not like a publisher ecosystem of virtual content yet, like there is of other kinds of instructional assets, from books to videos to everything else. The VR content just isn't there yet. So the platform seems to be evolving faster than the actual content side of the ecosystem, which is sort of an interesting development to watch as time goes by.
The other thing I will say really quickly is I saw a demo. I went to ASU GSV, I think it was last year. Like the one, it wasn't the one, the most recent one, but it was like two times ago now. And it was right after, it was like one of the first conference I went to after COVID. And there was actually a ASU, Arizona State, put on made a big showing. They partnered with a VR company in Hollywood to like make some VR content. And I sat through the demo. It was really, it was really slick. But I felt like there were a couple things that struck me. One is it was interesting because you were sitting in a room where like 6 people all had a headset on. And in the virtual space, those 6 people were there. And that was actually kind of cool. Like a lot of VR demos I go to, it's just so solo, it's so isolated. And there was a moment where I was like, oh, well, if I could go talk to those other, avatars, that could be really interesting. Maybe they don't even have to be in the same physical room. But the actual demo was very on rails and very isolated and individual. And, that's the challenge is there's the possibility and then there's the current reality. And so, it's a challenge to be able to take advantage of the possibilities in that format when it is so expensive to build at the moment, to build these environments. But they had taken some entertainment VR environment and then try to tack on a kind of a biology demo that did make sense. I mean, there was some logic to it. So in other words, like, can you take commercial builds of VR and then put in a layer that looks good enough that's customized to the university's needs? So we'll see.
Yeah, I wasn't at that ASU GSV, but I remember when that came out because it got shared around, and I probably had 3 or 4 people send me the YouTube video, and it was really neat. So maybe in the last couple minutes we have, we could kind of talk a little bit about kind of how you conclude the article, which is like, how can we capture these lessons learned and kind of sustain them going forward? And I'll just share one thing we're doing here, which is we have had this digital learning course redesign initiative, which predated the pandemic. It turned out to be actually good timing because we had a bunch of faculty that were kind of ready. But as we've continued that and extended it now into its next phase, one of the things we've identified is that we're trying to fund is tell us what you learned through the pandemic that worked, that we could do some additional experimentation on, or that we could potentially scale to other faculty who maybe didn't hear about this method that you came up with. And so it's a very specific pandemic response innovation kind of seeding to try to identify those flowers and grow them more into a garden. We'll see how successful we are, but that's one strategy.
I think in a way, it seems like it's 2 things of that, right? They're identifying something worthy of being a model, not just a thing a professor came up with, and then actually getting it out to more people. And so it seems like what I was hearing was a mix of that from the people we talked to, or what we heard is, have universities done enough to capture the lessons? That came up. I heard that especially from Matthew Raskoff, excuse me. He, it seems like their center is really trying to do a very research-oriented, rigorous project to go around the university and find out what kind of things happened that might just be forgotten, that and what they were, and obviously whether they were, how well they did, but it's also just kind of documenting what just happened in a way that doesn't lose some things that could be a flower, but that particular professor doesn't have the interest or time or whatever to like make it something that gets picked up. And then of course the other question that has come up a lot, I think, during the pandemic, and I think you guys worked on a lot, is professional development, right? In general, like how do you, whether it's specific ideas or models, but also just how do you keep people up to date? Everybody got a crash course on the tools that are there today, but Zoom may not be around forever. Who knows what the next thing, you and I are on, maybe even a headset on or not. I don't know. Like whatever it is you and I are doing this on in a few years, if it's different, like how do you make sure people keep up with it there too, right?
Yeah. Well, I look forward to interviewing the Jeff Young hologram at some point in the future, or being interviewed by the Jeff Young hologram. So, Jeff, that was great. We could talk so much more about that article, but we'll definitely share it in the show notes for the episode. And for Kelvin and myself, thank you so much for being on Topcast.
Great. No, thank you.
Well, Tom, that was your interview with Jeff Young.
Yep. Enjoyed the conversation. Any time I have a chance to talk to Jeff, I always learn something. And as we alluded to, he and I had dinner together with a large group of people at South by Southwest in March, I believe. And I was fortunate to sit next to him and got to have a nice chat and learn some things and discuss some stuff.
Yeah, and a shout out here. I mean, maybe it's more of a novelty now than anything, but I really just appreciated the mini-series that he did back in 2020, those Pandemic Campus Diaries mini-series. I thought that was excellent. I guess now it's as much time capsule and historical documentation as anything else, but that was excellent, I thought.
Yeah, and just to kind of maybe pull one of the threads that we talked about, his observation of the Moocs and the connection to the potential hype, to go back to your hype versus hope, as an analogy to what's happening with the metaverse now. Moocs still exist, but they have evolved significantly since 2012. They're not the same thing that they were, and I wonder what will happen with the metaverse. If there seems to be a lot of hype around it now. Some of it seems a little forced by corporate entities that want us to buy things to support the metaverse. But will there be legitimate educational use cases for that? Probably, but I haven't quite seen a scalable version of that yet.
Yeah, I feel like at this point there should be an obligatory inserted shout out to the Gartner hype curve in here. I don't recall you two mentioning that,
you didn't, but I'm a big fan.
Me too.
The trough of
disillusionment.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the plateau of productivity or some such. Yes. Yes, I find great wisdom in this small device. It's like, there's going to be elevated things, and then you're going to be completely devastated, and then maybe, hopefully, you'll find some reasonable place for this innovation.
I saw one recently when adaptive learning had come out of the trough of disillusionment.
Good to know.
It was,
We're so happy for it.
Yeah, I'm glad. I was pleased because I've been cheering it on for many years now.
Yes. Maybe another shout out, self-servingly perhaps, to our first model, for leading innovation and change. We had a podcast episode. We'll stick a link in the show notes, and we've done a book chapter and several presentations around that. I was thinking about, in particular, the advice that we've given to stay tuned in to trends and choosing when to put your, proverbial toe in the water. Like, when do you just sort of sit and watch, and when do you actually start to get involved in some way? Yeah.
I think that's a good reference for this conversation, and maybe we can include that in the old show notes. I have an article coming out in a forthcoming book from OLC, or chapter, about leadership lessons from the pandemic, which seems at least related to this, although they're a little more generic leadership lessons. They're not so specific to, you must consider flipped courses, or, I didn't really talk about that. But when that time comes, I will do a shameless plug for that, and maybe we'll cite this episode back.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think generally, right, periodically processing kind of where we are and sort of working to synthesize is so important. We've talked previously a number of times about how difficult it is to predict with any great clarity, what's going to happen. But, I think there's a difference between predicting and seeking to lead by, like, here's advice. This seems like a a good thing to be doing at this point, whatever.
Yeah, well, at least informed by experience, right?
Yes.
So it's looking backwards and looking forwards.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Well, I appreciated the conversation with Jeff, and I would encourage anybody listening to this to check out both EdSurge and the EdSurge on Air podcast. I've been interviewed on that podcast, and it's one that I really like to listen to.
Well, you want to try to land us on this episode topic?
I will. So I would say that in our field of online and distance learning, it can be difficult to discern the difference between hype and the genuinely helpful. One can be subscribing to several reputable different news outlets with connections to trusted colleagues with deep expertise, and I think we should. We should be subscribing to all kinds of things, including EdSurge and a bunch of others that I could list here, and I'm sure that you've got your list as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's good advice. I think that, you hear multiple voices and it helps you make sense of things. And I think you and Jeff made that comment that, like, you may not get to see people all the time or but what are the analogs? Like, what are the other ways that you can kind of virtually hear from people?
Right,
And that's one of them, those kind of things. Well, awesome. If you don't mind, I'll slide in a little timely plug before we get out the door.
Plug it in.
So, dear listener, if you haven't already done so, please remember that from now, whenever you're listening to this, through the end of September 2022, if you share a link to Topcast via social media and then email us a link to your post, you will be entered in a drawing to win a Topcast listener mug, not unlike the one I'm drinking from right now. It'll be delivered right to your address. Now, you're welcome to share social media posts at any time, whenever you're listening to this, but if it happens outside of September 2022, you're not going to be entered into this drawing. So send entries to topcast@ucf.edu, topcast@ucf.edu, and it would be really helpful if you'd use the subject line drawing entry, just so we don't lose it. But hey, we'll take it. And the winner will be announced in a future episode after the drawing occurs. So hoping we get a little bit of social media love.
Yeah. Post and send us a link, and you too could be drinking coffee out of the fabulous Topcast mug.
That's right. Well, Tom, thanks for having that interview with Jeff, and thanks for sharing the coffee here with me. Always delightful. And dear listeners, until next time for Topcast, I'm Kelvin.
And I'm Tom.
See ya.